Water. It is necessary in our daily lives, and access to water is easy. But do you know where our drinking water comes from? Who controls water runoff during heavy rainfall? And who handles the millions of gallons of wastewater we produce every day? We take it for granted that there are plans for these water-related issues. What are those plans? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yenji Denise. Imagine a day without water. That's what the Honolulu Board of Water Supply would like you to do as a way to begin to understand how critical fresh flowing water is to our daily lives and why we shouldn't take it for granted. Water management doesn't begin and end with safe drinking water. Wastewater must also be carefully managed and monitored to assure protection of our environmental and public health. And runoff when it rains also needs to be managed. So tonight, we'll hear from people charged with managing the water resources of Oahu. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Ernest Lau is the manager and chief engineer of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. He's worked in water management around the state for more than 20 years. Tim Houghton is the deputy director of the Department of Environmental Services for Honolulu. His department is responsible for wastewater and solid waste services for Oahu. Ross Sasamura is the director and chief engineer of the Department of Facility Maintenance. Among other things, his department oversees the storm drain systems for the city. And Josh Stanbro is the executive director of Honolulu's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. This office was created in 2016. Its mission is to increase community preparedness as well as to develop resilient infrastructure in response to climate change. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is such an important issue. Ernie, I want to start with you. You know, we do take water for granted, and I'm interested to know what you think is the biggest threat to having this clean water, flowing into our homes, and as we said in the intro, the wastewater flowing out. What's the biggest threat to this system, and what does your agency do to make sure that we're protected?
I think the biggest threat on the long term is what climate change might bring to our community. Our source of drinking water comes from the rain that falls on our watersheds, on our mountains. And if the patterns in the rain or the intensity or the amount of rainfall changes, that has a direct impact on our groundwater resources. We depend on our groundwater resources for our drinking water.
How would you answer that question? What do you think is the biggest threat to clean water in our community?
I think the biggest threat is really just complacency. And looking at storms, looking at rainfall, a lot of people look at trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible, trying to shoot it to the street, redirect it so that it doesn't harm any of the properties or their homes or structures. But really, rainwater is a resource. As much as pure drinking water is important to us, all of the rainwater that we're able to capture and reuse eliminates that need to go back to the potable water resource and use that clean, pure drinking water to water our lawns and do other things that we could use recycled rainwater on.
Are we doing enough to capture that rainwater?
I think we need to do more, and I think everybody has a role in doing that, not only to capture rainwater, but also to ensure that our nearshore waters are clean by cleaning up around the house, picking up litter, preventing sediments, chemicals, and other things from entering the storm drain system, where ultimately it ends up in nearshore waters where we recreate, where we fish, where we have fun.
What do you think is the biggest threat to the system, and how does your agency play a part?
Well, for us, and I think it's making sure that this water resource is looked at as a whole. It is not just one piece, or it is a whole cycle. We're in the cycle where we take used water and collect that, treat it, and reintroduce it into the natural system, whether that be through an ocean discharge or it be through a groundwater discharge. But the idea there really, and to me, is how do we make sure we collect that, we take it, treat it, make sure that it's ready to reintroduce into the system. And it's also that, as Ross suggests, it's that resource that as we need it over time can be converted directly into on-island reuse when we need that so that it can offset the potable water. So we're all part of the same cycle, and we still contribute to the cycle even today because evaporation feeds the clouds, feeds the rainfall, so we're all part of that same cycle.
Ernest
He stole my thunder.
climate change.
I'm sorry, Josh.
No, that's okay.
But
It's good
tell
to
us
have
how
the,
your
ally at
office
the
is
table.
working to address that.
Well, I mean, I think, in terms of looking at challenges, obviously climate change is changing the context in which, we utilize and are able to, take advantage of water here on island. But really, we've built infrastructure for many years, and this is across the country, I mean, it's not just here, to, essentially get rid of water as fast as we can and take it away, whether it's wastewater or whether it's stormwater. And I think the real challenge is how do we design infrastructure, whether it's green infrastructure or gray infrastructure or however that pivots that and is able to capture the value that Tim's talking about. Is how do we make sure that it's a sort of a one water approach where whatever drop it is, we value it for the highest possible value and use it as much as we can, because with the change of climate change, if we're getting these bigger downpours more suddenly, a lot of that water is running off and we're losing it to the aquifers. And so how do we capture it? And that's an infrastructure problem. And so I think how do we work with the community and work with funders and infrastructure managers such as these guys? I mean, we work on policy, they work on the actual tools and build new infrastructure that helps us stay relevant over the horizon into the 21st century.
I think for people, when you think about these problems, they just seem so enormous. What is something that we can do, and I pose the question basically to all of you on an individual level to really support that? I know, for instance, catching the rainwater as it falls off your house is one way to do that, but what are some ideas that you have that we could actually, in practical ways, do
Some
this?
practical ways are just like fixing leaks, a leaky faucet, a leaky pipe, making sure your irrigation system is working properly and not going off when it's raining. So some simple things, taking shorter showers, not leaving the tap running, the faucet running when you're brushing your teeth, but shutting it off and using a cup to rinse out your mouth. So those are some practical things. It begins with every individual person in our community taking stewardship responsibility for this precious resource, this VI. And like what Josh said, we need to look at water in all forms in a one water approach, and that requires all of us to work together to accomplish that.
We have a caller from Makiki, and I guess this would be, I'm guessing for your agency, but the caller has seen spouts, spigots in public parks like Ala Moana that are left running. Is there a way for the Department of Water to change the valve to prevent waste?
So I would say that's our public parks are under the City Department of Parks and Recreation. And that's a program and an opportunity for them to look at how they can manage water usage on the parks, which is probably one of the biggest water users in the city and county of Honolulu. So I think they're putting efforts toward fixing their plumbing. They also have the struggle of dealing with vandalism, people that just don't care. They'll leave the shower running even after they're done, or when they should shut it off, or they go out and break the plumbing and let water just leak out.
So Yunji, one of the things that I would ask viewers to really take to heart is that we can't be at all places at all times to see these issues as they arise, and we hope that people will report them to us so that we can address them properly. We have a hotline that people can call, 768-4381, to report any kinds of problems they see out on streets or in the parks with faucets that may not close, whatever concerns they may have. If they can report it to that number, it'll get directed to the proper agency to be corrected.
I think we have slightly different issue when people will connect downspouts to their sewer system. And the sewer system isn't designed to accept that water. The sewer system is really what we call a separate sanitary sewer system. And that when we get a heavy rain and the roof downspouts are connected, that can create substantive problems and create spills because the system isn't big enough to handle that flow. So we want to encourage people to make sure that downspouts are disconnected, you have a clean out in the front of your yard, that the cap is on the clean out, that you're not taking a manhole cover off, sewer manhole cover off to drain the street, because you're going to create a different problem somewhere else, and you actually waste that water. You don't get it treated in the proper manner. So things like that to us are very important, and it's a way to really make sure that we're capturing the right kind of water and treating it, and making sure that the other water may be available for, you know, groundwater recharge or other things through capturing it in a different way.
I would just say, you know, everything adds up. So everybody, you know, takes the approach that, oh, just a little bit of, you know, paving my driveway all the way, or, you know, hooking my gutter up to, you know, to the stormwater, or, you know, whatever it is. You know, it's just a little bit. It's not going to make a difference. But if you're doing that thousands and thousands of parcels and thousands of people in a watershed, you know, pretty soon that watershed stops being absorptive. It's not like a sponge. So back in, you know, how nature designed it to be is that it would rain and it would soak into the ground, and you would recharge your aquifer, and the streams only had to be a certain size to get the water off and in their channels to the ocean. But as you harden and use these impervious surfaces and pave over your entire yard, you know, all that water's got to go somewhere, and it adds up. And so, I mean, it really is incumbent on people to think about, you know, it may be just a little bit that I'm doing, but if that's multiplied time and time again, suddenly those streams that were built for a certain size can't handle the volume. And especially as we see with climate change, we get more rain on those impervious surfaces, you know, it'll just jump outside of that channel regardless of, you know, whether it's cleaned out and maintained or, you know, whatever else. It just might be too much volume. And so it's that additive piece that we really got to make sure that we're each doing our best.
Right, and those kinds of things really multiply when we think about how development increases,
Yes.
how the population on Oahu increases. And as we develop more and as we build more homes and as people expand more, we have less opportunity to absorb that rainwater into the ground, where it can be actually put back into the aquifer so that we can draw upon it and we can have something that's sustainable.
So you're saying, you know, if you can, don't necessarily add all that pavement, or don't necessarily do the driveway in that way. Are there ways to do this in a more sustainable way that also is still convenient and you still have the house that you want?
Right. So in the same way that we're experiencing climate change, how we see different weather patterns, how we see different temperatures, we have to behave differently to make sure that we can sustain the kind of environment that we want for our children and our children's children in the future.
It's called adaptation.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to adapt to changing conditions, and that's the reality we face today.
One of the other realities, of course, is that we do have an aging system here. We have, I believe, on average of one water main break a day. You would know better than me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know that very well.
And this is not a challenge unique, obviously, to Honolulu. This
It
is a
is not
challenge that
unique, yes.
municipalities all over the country are facing. Tell us about what we can do as a system to address that. We can't dig out every street. So how do we make sure that that is lessened and also keeping the costs in line?
Right, so that's the balancing act here. On one side, you need reliable infrastructure, and I know the public would like to have less main breaks. On the other side is how to keep water bills affordable for our customers so they can still afford to get the water service. So that balancing act is achieved by doing a thorough planning effort, developing long-term plans to look at what the infrastructure needs are to improve reliability, maintain the safety and quality of the water, while balancing that with the affordability issue. So we've just completed a 30-year master plan in 2016, and we're operating to implement that plan. It looked at the entire water system, all of our assets, and has developed a strategy in how to sustain these assets. 2,100 miles of pipeline, unfortunately about one main break a day per year. We feel that's too much, and we're working hard to actually reduce that. Some of it's going to come down to just some basic things. With infrastructure, especially buried infrastructure, unfortunately you have to dig it up, or dig up the road and lay new infrastructure to replace the old infrastructure. Those are difficult construction projects and sometimes disruptive to the community, but we have to do them. It's very expensive too, but we have to do it as efficiently as we can while keeping things affordable, and that's a big challenge. Utilities across the country are striving to do this. They're struggling with this. We're all trying to achieve, I think now, replacing at least 1% of our our water mains a year. And for us, that's at least 21 miles a year. So over the next 10 years, we're going to increase our pipeline replacement to that 21 miles. City of LA is trying to achieve the same thing. Other cities across the country are trying to achieve that target. Infrastructure is not fancy. A lot of it for us and for Ross and facilities maintenance and for Tim in sewers and wastewater is buried infrastructure. It's out of sight, out of mind. People don't think about the problems and the challenges of that infrastructure until there's a problem. Then they wonder why that problem occurs. So that's the challenge. Developing good long-term plans, I think, is a key. You need to figure out a strategy to approach this and not approach it haphazardly.
The other side of that coin, of course, are the sewers, and a lot of people are concerned with all the high-rise development that we see and wondering, can we actually handle all those people living in all those places, you know, all together?
Just to tag for a second on what Ernie was saying, we have another 2,100 miles of line, and we have for the last 10 years been going through and doing a lot of work on those lines. Luckily, we can do our work a little differently. We don't necessarily have to dig it up and replace it. We can line it, you know, so it's less disruptive in the way it's done. And we've reduced our spills significantly, so we're down in the area of about 24, 25 spills a year now. But you know, from there, it's really, yeah, it's expensive. But we really just need to keep on that process. We've got a lot of work to do. As you know, we have a consent decree out there. But a lot of money will go into treating the water better so it's better quality and reusable. So things like that are happening. We've been doing a lot of work, and it's been very expensive, but that is the rates and everything. Like Ernie, everything we do is paid for by our ratepayers.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, I think they've talked about expense and that these things are expensive to do, but I think in a certain way, we got to talk about, you know, you pay now or you pay later.
Right.
And so, you know, the Federal Reserve Bank out of San Francisco just today released a whole slew of analysis around what climate change impacts are going to be on the fiscal impacts on cities and on municipalities. And a lot of it has to do with flooding. And so when they look at, you know, they're looking at banks not lending in certain areas to folks who are trying to buy homes in these new flood areas because we're getting more flooding. And if we don't invest in the infrastructure to handle stormwater, or we don't invest in the infrastructure to handle the water, that actually comes back on the city in terms of, you know, property values and property tax, and it comes back on homeowners, and I can't get financing to build my home. And so I think it's important that as we see and we talk about what, you know, climate change is doing, but also what aging infrastructure is doing, you know, you invest in good infrastructure and you pay for it up front. You know, we know that for every dollar you put in on infrastructure and resilience, you save $6 on the back end in terms of, you know, preventing disaster and preventing damage.
Yeah.
And so it's important to keep that in mind when we talk about expense, that it's actually less expensive than the alternative of neglect.
You know, to follow back on the new development issue, before somebody can build a high-rise or whatever, one of the things that they always do get frustrated with is sometimes there being sewer capacity there. We try to work with them to find ways to make that happen. We don't want to be the stumbling block to, say, affordable housing or other things, but it is a timing issue sometimes if it really needs additional capacity, because it's going to take 6 or 8 years to build additional lines, but we'll work with the developer trying to find ways to make that happen so that we continue to safely develop. We're also, you know, looking at ways, how do people reduce the amount of water that comes out of a new building, things like that. You know, those are kind of changes we need to look forward to, because there's still only going to be so much capacity. But I will suggest that our general flow, and it's certainly a good combination with Ernie, is that our flow 20 years ago in our system was 120 million gallons a day. This last year it was 110 million gallons a day, despite population increases, despite more housing.
Water conservation.
And such. Water conservation and pipelining and such.
We have some numbers also to add to the discussion. I'd love to see those now in a graphic that we have that's coming up. There it is. So, and just to echo what you were saying, 110 million gallons per day for our wastewater system, 9 treatment plants, as you said, 2,100 miles of pipes, and the consent decree, which is 100% compliant through 8 years. So those are some big numbers there. How are we paying for all of that?
All of what we do is paid for by our sewer users. We're very conservative in our financial program. We're spending a lot of money on that system. The consent decree was originally projected in 2010 dollars at $5.2 billion, and we're obviously well on the way of spending that. We do borrow money. We do issue wastewater revenue bonds. We're actually going to do that next week, another $250 million or so. But we've been very good at watching the finances, where we've been able to continue to reduce even the cost of borrowing as the interest rates have gone down. We've refinanced just like you would do with a mortgage, trying to take care of as much as we can to keep that cost down for the owner, but it is for the customer. But it is definitely expensive, but it is all paid for by our customer. We get some loans from the state, what we call the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which our interest rates are about 1.25%. So we're looking for all of those ways to do this work at the least cost, but spread that cost really over the life of the system, so that people today don't have to pay for everything up front, that people, as they use it, pay for it.
Well, there definitely is a cost question, and we knew these were coming, and we love the questions, so keep them coming. But they want to know, and this is for either of you, why is there such a huge disparity between the low water usage bill and the high sewer charge? So why is your product so much less than his?
Well, we don't have a consent decree, which put forward a pretty aggressive schedule for improvements to the aging the infrastructure,
to the
for the wastewater side. And what we endeavor to do is try to keep up with our infrastructure needs and not get too far behind. But they have a bigger challenge. Their treatment process is very expensive to meet the Clean Water Act.
Right.
For us, it's providing safe drinking water to people. And we're blessed with a good groundwater resources. So you can almost pump the water out of a well or have a tunnel drilled into the side of the mountain, and the water is almost ready to drink. The EPA requires us to chlorinate it. So we put a disinfectant into the water. But beyond that, except in Central Oahu, we provide little treatment. And we're blessed with that. That blessing is something that we cannot take for granted, though. The groundwater resources are easily contaminated by uses on the surface or below the ground. So there are some, you asked me earlier what are the biggest threats, and I said climate change on the long term. There are other issues that threaten our groundwater resources on the near term, and that has the potential for large-scale contamination. So we are aggressively trying to protect the resource, protect the VI, because if not, the cost of treatment is expensive. I know we talk about cost and affordability for our customers and the issues and challenges of climate change. But I just have this feeling that we maybe, rather than looking at everything as a problem, we look at it as an opportunity to be progressive, to lead by example for the rest of the world. Things we can do in our island community that maybe no place else does. I think there are great opportunities here. Being sustainable in our energy resources is one. Being the best managers of our water resources, taking the one water approach, breaking down silos between organizations and operating together for the good of our community. I think that's a great opportunity. Looking at innovative technologies and yet handling the issues of affordability for our customers, because at the end of the day, the money is not going to come necessarily from the federal government. No. They want to do something else with the money there. So we're going to have to exist with the revenue that we get from the people of this community. And how we do that, I think we can try to soften the blow of the rate increases, but rate increases are necessary on the water, wastewater, or even maybe a future stormwater fee, are necessary for the good of our community.
Well, to that point about being innovative, we have two questions here. Larry and Makiki, and this is probably for you and for you. Is there a way, he wants to know, is there a way to catch rainfall at high-rise buildings? And another caller who wishes to remain anonymous asks, with all the incredible rainfall lately, it blows my mind that we don't have water catchment systems set up all over the islands. What better ways can we be catching this rainwater?
Well, the first thing is when we plan and build new facilities, water catchment systems, cisterns, and other things should be integrated into the design. So we already have requirements in place for low impact development where the first inch of rainfall needs to be contained within the parcel itself. But residents that live in existing buildings can do their part to make sure that whatever rainwater they're able to capture, whether it be on a lanai or in their yard, or in high-rise buildings, there are opportunities on the rooftops of those buildings or in the parking areas or recreation decks. All of the systems that are designed, again, to collect and shed stormwater, rainwater, can be diverted to collection points where those resources can then be reused on site to irrigate and to provide sources of water for non-potable types of uses. And that's one of the things that we're trying to encourage. We have rain barrel workshops that our outreach team does go out and provide to different communities. We actually coordinate a lot of work with the Board of Water Supply with their communications and outreach team, because a rain barrel actually represents many opportunities for the both of us. It represents keeping stormwater on property and not being discharged into nearshore water, streams, rivers, and the ocean. It also represents another source that can be used to replace potable water for non-potable sources. There's a third piece of this that we're now beginning to integrate into our outreach, and that is during times of emergency, when water systems may be impaired or compromised because of a storm, those rain catchment systems can be used to flush toilets or provide other non-potable sources
On-site storage.
until the Board of Water Supply can restore service to everyone.
Yeah.
So there are many opportunities that are available to people. We have rain barrel workshops, the Board of Water does too. And so we encourage people to take advantage of these opportunities, or even go online to see how they can construct a rain barrel and go to the hardware store and pick up some materials that are readily available.
Are we doing enough on the individual and also on the sort of system-wide level to catch this rainwater?
I mean, I think the challenge around the table and the acknowledgement around the table is we're not doing enough, but nobody else is either. And it's our challenge to figure out how to innovate and how to do these pilots to move the needle forward and try to, I mean, in an ideal world, we capture every drop. I mean, it's that precious. I mean, the original, you know, we constantly are reminded how important water is, because the word for water is vai, and the word for, you know, wealth in Hawaiian is vai. So it's, I mean, you who had a lot of water had wealth, and I don't think that changes in a modern society where, you know, water is the most important resource, and if we can capture more drops, we become more wealthy as a community. You know, I think, you know, when you talk about catchment, there's a couple different elements of that, and one is, you know, when you ask why is our water cheaper than our wastewater, we have some help, and it's thousands of trees up in the watershed that capture the rain, they capture the fog drip, and they've done an amazing job of capturing and purifying our water at no cost to us. I mean, that you know, payment from nature that we don't take for, you know, we take for granted and we shouldn't, is huge. And then I think the other thing is, you know, we had a long history, you know, throughout the islands of capturing water in reservoirs for the agriculture economy that had developed here. And that has gone by the wayside. And obviously after the Koloko, you know, catastrophe on Kauai, there was sort of a rush to dismantle some of these reservoirs. And I think, you know, as we look at a future where we need to capture every drop, we need to make sure as we get big rainfall, we want to hold that water up in the upper areas to let it percolate back in and keep it from flooding down low. We want to make sure that we are, you know, preserving and protecting those reservoir areas, or building new catchment areas in flood control projects that'll help with that, because we do want to make sure that we catch it not only at the house level with rain barrels, but at scale in green infrastructure.
Yeah, I think just on that same track, the more that gets captured, whether it's reservoirs or it's catchment systems or in yards and such is stuff that doesn't end up into the sewer system, which again, is a positive for us because it means we don't have to grow that infrastructure. We can continue to operate the existing infrastructure with the right materials and the right stuff. So capturing that is positive all the way around the cycle.
Well, we have a photograph we wanted to show you, and Ross, I'd love you to tell us about this. This is a basin. It's right by the new bus terminal. I believe that's on South King Street right there. Is that right? Or right there.
Right.
A basin like that, when you look at it, to the naked eye, to me, it doesn't look like it holds that much, but actually that can be very significant.
It's a drainage swale, and it's one that is designed to absorb stormwater. So water that's coming off of parking lots that generally would maybe carrying oils and other pollutants that would harm the environment if released into a stream or the ocean actually gets cleansed through all of the grass there, all of the plantings, and then the water is absorbed into the ground where it then goes to replenish the aquifer. So those are some of the green infrastructure types of improvements that we're encouraging everybody to do. The photo that you just showed there actually is part of the Joint Traffic Management Center that the city's constructing on Alapai and South King Street.
Lloyd in Waianae wants to know, as you replace those 2,100 miles, or 21 miles, is that right? Yes.
Miles.
Suddenly that number just seemed enormous to me. As you do that,
Close to San Francisco. Yeah.
as you do that percentage every year, is the Board of Water Supply replacing old cast iron pipes with some better technology that will last longer? And sort of piggybacking on that, we hear about systems on the mainland that have a lot of lead. Flint comes to mind, and that's a very extreme example that was exacerbated, of course, by some decisions to use river water and whatnot. But they're not the only municipality that are facing lead in the water. I think Philadelphia is another. Is that a risk for us here?
Based on our tests, the lead issues are not a risk. Although we just recently learned that the EPA is thinking about some new regulations that will require testing by the utility for lead inside the customer's property, mainly schools or nurseries or care homes. So that's something we're looking at to see what those regulations are going to require. Fortunately, right now, the lead is not an issue for us, and we're groundwater based. Like you said, Flint, they changed their source of water from a surface water source. I think it was originally from the city of Detroit of Lake Huron, and changed to the Flint River. And it was done basically by people that made decisions on pure economics. And unfortunately, through problems with the operations staff, turnover in the operations staff, people retiring, some of the knowledge wasn't there to adjust the capability of the plant to handle the different quality water, source water.
This is a question I actually have for you, and this says, is there a possibility the population will reach a point where we exhaust our fresh water supply? What do we do then? And another caller wants to know, does technology exist to turn salt water to fresh, clean water to help preserve our drinking water? So could we get to a point where we actually run out of water? And if that did happen, is salt water a way for us to go?
Well, I'll defer to Ernie on the saltwater one. But I think it's really important that, as an island community, by definition, we've always existed within our means. And we need to be able to harken back to the lessons of the past around, look, you have this much, now you figure out how to allocate it, how to protect it, and make sure that it's going to be around for your kids and for your grandkids. I think some of the advances we've made in water conservation, going from 120 million gallons a day down to 110 million gallons a day, is testimony that conservation and stewardship and responsible management of a resource. And when you look at that number and the increasing population, I think it gives us hope that, sure, more people can come in. We've got some of the most, we're so blessed. I just can't underline how blessed we are as an island, and the way that our rock has formed, and the way that the rains fall, and the way that we're able to capture that with the trades, that we have an abundance of water historically. That won't be the case in the future if we don't manage it, competently and responsibly. But so far we have, and so I think that gives us positive as long as we all step forward and do the right thing, and as long as we all invest, and as long as we give a little bit ourselves for the benefit of the whole. I think the future's bright around water.
Yeah, I think the same thing. We just, at the point we work with Ernie and we look at when he's looking at his potable water supply and such, you have to take and make use of more of the wastewater supply into reusable water, so that you can that becomes usable on land and such, so that we don't just put it in the ocean. Which just has a value, but it's going to, at some point, it probably has much more value as a direct offset to the potable water source.
How much are we doing that now, reusing that so-called gray water?
Well, the gray water is really an individual kind of location, and I don't know. There's a lot of numbers to that. Between us, we give about 13 million gallons a day to Ernie and his team to produce recycled water out of Honolulu treatment plant. We do a small amount in Laie, but there's future opportunities there that we need to continue to look at, and when that timing is right, make sure that we are ready to go to those, to make sure that we're protecting the potable drinking water requirement.
Kind of building off of what Josh was saying about the population and will we run out of water. Right now we're very fortunate without large-scale agriculture in the island, what we call the sustainable yield for the island of Oahu is about 407 million gallons a day that can be used. We're maybe about halfway there, and right now municipal use or use by the people that live in our community is the biggest user, along with the military and some private systems. We've been very fortunate from the 90s to about the early 2010 that even though the population was increasing like this, the per person use, because of changes in plumbing codes, water conservation, made changes so that the per person use actually went down and saved us. So water use didn't go up, but stayed flat over that time frame. And even though the population was climbing. That's not unusual, and across the country other locations have experienced the same trend. But we see now that as we have become more efficient, that with population increases over the next 30 years, we're going to have to actually develop a few more wells to provide the needs, but we have enough for at least the next 30 to 40 years. We're looking also at seawater desalination. And you wonder why are we looking at desalting seawater and making it fresh for people to use? The reason is, right now, we need to gain experience on how to do that and what it takes to do that before we get in a crisis situation. That maybe because of climate change, we get into a 10-year period of drought and our water resources are diminishing and we need to look at alternative sources of water. It'll be too late then to look at seawater desalination from scratch. So we're going to do something, a pilot project to develop a small seawater desal plant, but scalable for the future should we need it. So I think there's, maybe the concept is you have so much pay coming in every month into your checking account, and you learn to live within your means. So likewise, the checking account for how much water resources are available for our community, even though population's increasing, we need to learn how to adjust. So in our master plan, we set some targets, more aggressive water conservation efforts, rebate programs, changes in the code, on-site reuse in buildings, on properties, to try to reduce the per person usage even more. Right now, I think we're about 154, 155 gallons a day per person. We know we can go lower.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We all obviously feel a responsibility because we live here, but a caller brings up a good point and wants to know about monitoring hotel use and what's being done to that end. You know, if you're a tourist and you come here, you want to take a long, luxurious bath, maybe go swim in a pool, and I see you nodding there. I mean, how do we also, how do we ingrain that kind of awareness not only in the people who live here, but also in those that we welcome to visit?
Well, the hospitality industry already has started by allowing guests to actually take measures and ask that towels remain in place and that they not be immediately removed and laundered. So there are measures in place, but it does require some effort on the part of the guest to actually ask for that service or say something so that the normal protocol of removing towels on a daily basis and sending them up to get laundered are not repeated.
We also have a business water conservation program, so we have some staff that outreach to these businesses, hotels and others. I think the Hawaii Prince Hotel was a good example of what they did, working with the Hawaii Prince Hotel, which is trying to operate very sustainably. I think the bottom line, a lot of these businesses realize they need to operate in a sustainably responsible manner. And water resources are a valuable part of that factor of being sustainable. Using only what they need, because it also costs them money.
Right.
Not only the water side, the water is the cheaper side of the bill.
True.
Even though it comes from the water supply, and the sewer charges are quite a bit more. So if they want to save on their bottom line, it's in their interest to be efficient.
That's correct, yeah.
I think it's an important point, though, is that changing behavior is hard. Changing infrastructure can be easier in some ways and gain you a whole lot more scale. And so when Ernie talks about, making sure we're adopting the most up-to-date codes and making sure that there's water conservation measures in those codes and adopting the green building code, codes build the buildings that we live in, whether it's an individual or it's a tourist that comes to visit or, whatever. When you turn on the tap and it's a low flow tap, you're automatically going to use less water, even if you don't,
Right.
turn it off when you're brushing teeth. It's built into the system. So it's so critical that we make sure that our codes are as sustainable as they can possibly be, whether they're energy codes, building codes, plumbing codes, to make sure that just as a matter of course, our buildings are using less resources.
And how do we measure up on that scale? Or how are we doing compared to other cities when it comes to our code?
My goodness.
We're catching up.
Yeah, we're a little bit behind.
We are.
Yeah, but we have opportunities. Some of the challenges, though, we encounter, I think, when we want to change codes to be more greener codes, is pushback from the building industry, concerned about increasing cost of housing and other things. I mean, they're right. It does cost more upfront to comply with a greener code or more sustainable code. But I think if you look at the life cycle of that facility and its benefits to the environment and to the people that will live there eventually, it's a positive.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. It's about what's the long-term cost to live in a building and not necessarily what's the upfront cost to build it.
Right.
Because we have a little bit of a difference between what are the sort of interests of somebody building a building and then selling it or leasing it, and because they want to keep the cost as low as possible, and that might mean using appliances that use more energy or use more water because they know the cost is going to be borne by the person living in there. And so we really want to marry those two up and make sure that the value of that little bit of increase on the building code side is actually paid off many, many times over for local residents that are living in there and paying out of pocket month over month over month their utility bills.
Yeah, very, very much. And you're absolutely right. And we support that the concept that we need to begin to change move to change the building codes to allow on-site reuse, to do things like that affect positively in the sense that the sewer bill doesn't go up as much, that the water isn't the same issue, that here we are, we're making use of that which is right there. We get the gray water portion versus this, versus the brown water portion. And if you want to minimize the dirty water portion in that sense, so that really you can do it on site and make that really good use. It's a real change that we've got to make in the code in order to do that. And you've got to do that when you build the building.
Yeah.
Because you've got to put in...
A lot easier than after the fact.
Well, because you can't, retrofitting a high-rise is very difficult. But if I build the plumbing in to begin with, then that can work very well.
We've got a few questions. You talked about contamination a little bit earlier, and there are two questions here about Red Hill. I know that could be a show in and of itself, but but let's just get to these two. Angelica in Haleiwa says, the caller's been monitoring the military tanks at Red Hill for years. What's taking so long for the state to do something before the leaks impact our water aquifer? And the other caller wanting to know, can you share an update on the status of the Red Hill water problem with the Navy? I know it's a long one.
I'll try to be concise.
But
so
I
just
think
cut
it
me
is
off
something
if
that
you
does
need
give a
to.
lot of folks pause.
What's happening with Red Hill right now is, just for everybody's sake, there's 18 tanks being used, built during the Second World War, underground. Each tank can hold 12.5 million gallons. So almost 200 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel stored there, directly over the drinking water aquifer in that area. The fuel was held in place by a 1/4-inch steel plate that was installed between 1940 and 43. And there's documented evidence of corrosion on that steel plate and leakage. So the responsible parties that I'm hopeful will make the right decisions will be the State Department of Health and the US EPA. They are the regulators. There is an agreement called the Administrative Order and Consent. That's a voluntary agreement that DOH, EPA, Defense Logistics Agency, and the US Navy entered into. Unfortunately, the indications are, based on the submittal of the tank upgrade alternative option that was recommended by the Navy, was to do more of the status quo, just do the patching, inspecting and patching that 1/4-inch steel plate installed in the 40s. And we're not sure, we're definitely sure that that's not going to prevent any more leaks into the future. Our hope is that the DOH and EPA will listen to our concerns and the concerns of the community to protect our water resources in that area. That's really irreplaceable. And require a much more stringent solution. And what we recommend is double wall tanks there. Yes, they'll lose some capacity, but double wall tanks, 2 walls. The inner wall will hold the fuel. If there's a leak, the second wall will contain it so it doesn't get out and into the aquifer. We hope that that option will be selected. If not, they should look at relocation of the tanks.
Keeping in mind that obviously that we don't have the Navy to respond tonight, so we do want to.
I want to be sure, to be fair with them. And we had a fuel tank advisory committee meeting this morning. It went for about 3 hours. It was a great discussion, and I appreciate the opportunity each year to have that public discussion and allow the community to make comments. The EPA and DOH have informed us that in November, sometime around the middle or just before Thanksgiving, they're going to hold a public meeting and solicit comments for people to come out and provide input on the tank upgrade alternative report that the Navy recently submitted. It's all available on the Department of Health's website or the US EPA at epa.gov/red-hill, and they can download a copy of that report, and they can come over and provide comments when the media is noticed.
Well, I'm sure that, excuse me, will be very well attended, I would imagine.
So that's kind of my immediate threat to our resources in a huge fashion.
Absolutely. I'm sure that gives your office pause as well.
Well, I mean, I think, when you look at threats, a day without water, right? I mean, that's part of the reason we're all around the table. And if you think about what are the things that could cause a day without water, long term, we think climate change. Near term, some sort of pollution or an act of terrorism, or one of those things that would actually turn off your tap. And I think if you can imagine a day where firefighters can't get access to water, hospitals don't have water to clean your wounds, you can't flush your toilet, you realize how central water is. And I think that's something, again, a value that centuries ago was realized by folks who, on an island, when you're surrounded by salt water, fresh water really is you need air, you need water, and you need food. And that's all you really actually need. And so making sure that we take care of, in the face of climate change and these other threats, that number 2 one, water, is really it's sort of the highest purpose that we can have as public stewards, is to try to protect those critical resources for human survival.
We want to get to these questions because they are pouring in, and we welcome you to continue to submit them. Years ago, there was a great system set up with some of the newer developments in Eva. Has this system been implemented in any other parts of the island? I don't think that I'm familiar with this system.
I'm not sure if the caller is referring to the idea that, and I did kind of diss the developers or the building industry about trying to avoid additional costs so they can sell their product to the public. But the developers, to their credit, agreed upon the requirement to install dual piping systems in the roadways. One for potable usage, high quality drinking water. The second pipeline in the same road for recycled wastewater or non-potable water. And that's all
purple pipes.
Purple pipes, purple PVC pipes. Can't drink that one, and it's important, but perfectly fine for irrigation of landscaping, parks, highway, golf courses, and also for industrial use. Tim mentioned our recycled water facility. We're taking wastewater, treating it, and reusing it. About 10 million gallons a day, and we want to expand that use. Only possible in the Eva Plain because the requirement and the policy requirement that they install dual systems. Very expensive to the developer, but to their credit, they agreed to it. So we need some of that action, I think, in setting policy that maybe in the short term feels like medicine you don't want to swallow, bitter medicine, but on the long term, to the benefit of everybody.
Well, we have just 4 minutes left. I know it goes very fast, and I know we are all here to talk about and to raise awareness about this Imagining a Day Without Water, which is coming up on the 23rd. I want to kind of cycle back to where we started, and what's just one thing that you'd like each viewer to do? What's one thing that we can do to help to preserve this system and maintain it? I'll start with you.
I would just ask everybody to do their part. This water is precious. It's a gift. And you don't go and throw the gift away and waste it. Treat it as a gift and be careful on how you use it.
Water is an irreplaceable resource, something that we take for granted too often. And each and every one of us can do something to help ensure that we prolong the quality and the supply of water that we have. So whether it's picking up litter, whether it's sweeping the gutter in front of your home, or setting up a rain barrel to catch some rainwater and reuse it on your property, all of those things add up. And in the same way that a piece of litter up in Wilhelmina Rise, if left to go into the storm drain system, ends up in the Alawai Harbor as a part of a greater, huge area of litter, we can each do something to prevent that bad stuff from happening.
To tag on that, with what we have called wastewater, it's really used water, can be reused. I really would like to see people paying attention to the ideas of watch what you put down your drain. Okay, don't put grease down your drain. That can go into your trash, because grease in the sewer system will harden, constrict the pipe, cause spills, cause cost, and such. There are things that are advertised as flushable wipes. Most of them are not, because they don't disintegrate. Toilet paper disintegrates and is designed to do that. Don't use those, or at least don't flush them. Make use of the system for the proper reason. That makes it much easier for us to make sure that water that comes through the system is available to properly treat and perhaps make available for reuse or other such purposes.
Okay, and we'll give you the last word.
I'll send a softball to Ernie, which is drink water out of your tap. We have the best water quality in the nation. The water quality coming out of your tap is in most cases better than bottled water because of all the plastics that get sucked up into it in hot warehouses and even the source oftentimes. So the healthiest thing you can do and the cheapest thing you can do for yourself is just make sure you drink water in a water bottle reusable water bottle out of the tap, because what that does is it not only keeps you healthy, it keeps the system healthy, because you're actually running the system and paying back into the system. And we didn't even talk about hurricanes and the other things that are going to come with climate change more often. And I see people raid longs for all these plastic water bottles. Buy a collapsible big 5-gallon water jug, get a few of them and fill those up with tap water next time we have a storm scare, because A, that's better water for you, and B, as a sustainability guy in the sustainability office, I hate to see all that plastic going into our waste stream.
And just to add to that, it's less than a penny a gallon.
I like that. We have a visual reminder. All right, thank you so much. Mahalo to all of you for being here tonight. Of course, we thank our guest, Ernest Lau, Manager and Chief Engineer of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, Ross Sasamura, Director and Chief Engineer of the Department of Facility Maintenance, Tim Houghton, Deputy Director of the Department of Environmental Services, and Josh Stanbro, Executive Director of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Next week, Insights will be preempted to make room for What's It Going to Take, an executive forum on making life better in Hawaii. Leslie Wilcox will host a 2-hour live discussion with top business leaders who are tasked with finding solutions to long-standing problems in Hawaii, like the lack of affordable housing and jobs that pay a living wage. Join us next week from 8 to 10 p.m. I'm Yenji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.